Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And today we're talking with a special guest, Kelly Crowther. Kelly, how are you today?
I'm great, Joel. Thank you.
Kelly is an expert in the personality typology system of the Enneagram. So that's what today's podcast is on. It's on the personality psychology model called the Enneagram. And I'm going to just go ahead and let Kelly sort of explain what the Enneagram is, some of its benefits, and give us a bit of an overview on what the Enneagram is because she's got this stuff dialed in. So, Kelly, would you be willing to give us sort of an overview and some of the benefits of understanding and knowing the Enneagram?
Sure. I think one of the things about the Enneagram that's appealing to your audience is that it's another personality typing system. But this one, I think, goes a little bit deeper. It goes a little more into the emotional realm than maybe the cognitive functions and the MBTI stuff, or the Myers-Briggs stuff. Basically, it's a blueprint around the fundamental strategy that we use to understand our lives. And it's really useful. I've been looking at it for probably 12 years now, and it seems like I just keep finding more doors to go through, and it just keeps expanding itself. And I think that's what I love about it. It can really open the doors to getting yourself ready to transcend your personality if you're into that spirituality side, which is the part I love. Or it can be really about making your relationships better, making it easier to be a good coworker, a good leader in your place of employment, those kinds of things. So it really expands from one end to the other as far as the gamut goes.
I'm not going to do a lot of interrupting, by the way. I just want you to know that I'll probably ask some clarifying questions here and there.
Good.
Just as a clarifying question, you probably are about to launch into it, but just can you help us understand a little bit what that means as a strategy? Like the Enneagram is really great for understanding strategies for moving through life?
Yeah, absolutely. So to back up a little bit, the Enneagram, the word Ennea, E-N-N-E-A, is the word for 9 in Greek. And then gram is just the way they talk about the drawing, so the symbol of it. And it's a 9-pointed symbol, and you can look that up on Google to find out what that really looks like. But basically it's a circle with a 3-pointed equilateral triangle in it. And then the real meat of it is in the other symbol that's overlaid on top of that with 7 points on that. And it kind of shows you a pathway of how your personality integrates into a higher strategy and a lower strategy, so it disintegrates into that one. And so Ennea, meaning 9, means there are 9 personality types. And each one of those has something that they focus on. A lot of people think it might be genetic. It could be a learned strategy. We don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. But as you start to break them down into their 9 types, each one of them is striving to be something a little bit different. So as we go around the wheel, starting at 1, it's about perfection, and it's striving to be perfect. 2 is striving to connect with others, have emotional connections. 3 is striving to be outstanding. 4 is striving to find its own unique identity in the world. 5 is striving to be detached, non-attached. 6 is looking for security in the world. 7 is looking for freedom and excitement. 8 is looking to find power. And 9 is looking for peace. And so each of those, even though they're striving for those, can get a little bit corrupted. And as each type looks for that in the world, it colors their behavior. So that's where it can start to be a strategy. People are looking for the way that their type. Whatever it's looking for in the world, their strategy is always around that, but sometimes it doesn't look like the highest version of that. So for example, a 1 who's looking for perfection can actually start to be a perfectionist. And that's not a good thing. I mean, it becomes highly critical, mostly of their own internal state, but it can start to get projected out into the world, and they're going to be seeing a lot of things to criticize in the world that they feel like they can improve upon, and that starts to affect other people. So
okay, so there's 9 different types in the Enneagram, and each one is looking for a different, what would you call that, like an ultimate end result or a feeling? Like what ultimately are, like you talk about 1 seeking perfection, 9 seeking peace. Is this like a feeling, or is it a
state of being, maybe?
It's a desire, yeah. And it's I think it all comes back when you look at the whole system of the Enneagram. It kind of started a long time ago and got developed into a personality typing system, and one of the bases of what each type is looking for is to reach its own holy idea. So each one of them has a little bit of a different version, and the theory is that we're all of the Enneagram types. So there's a part of each one of them in us, and when we put all of them together in a healthy way, we become a whole person. That's not to say that we're not whole as it inherently, but that we don't see ourselves as whole. So when we can start looking at all the other perspectives of each of the other types, we can remember that wholeness.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. You were talking about how like 1, when it wants perfection, it can become a perfectionist. How do some of the others kind of do the same thing, maybe go down a bad path, or maybe not even, I don't even know if the term bad path is appropriate here, but how they kind of maybe go off path a little bit when they're attempting to find their ultimate end game desire?
Yeah, and before I answer that, I should probably explain that each one of the 9 types has 9 different levels to it. So it's a hierarchical sense within the type. So a 9 functioning at the very highest level, at the 1 level, which gets confusing, I'm just going to call it the highest level, is closer to self-actualization in terms of its own mission and desires, whereas a 9 functioning at the very lowest level can look like real pathology. So as we go around the wheel, there are different levels of engagement of each type. The 2, which looks for that emotional connectivity, tends to give in order to get in its lower forms. Now, in the higher form of that, that giving is very it's very generous, and it's the self doesn't have an agenda in it. It's just that that generous, willing to be of service. 3s, because they want to be outstanding, tend to be very much conscious of their image and how people are reflecting that back to them. So a lot of times you'll see 3s looking at achievement and looking for adding to their own credentials in order to feel like they're worthy to others in the world. 4s want their own identity, and in the lower levels of that, it can look like they're just wanting to be special and they keep themselves separate, but that they in the higher forms they really start to understand the human drama, and they can really be non-judgmental and completely accepting of wherever you are in your space. 5s being having the goal of wanting to be unattached can be great objective reflections of the world. They can really get to the truth very quickly. In their lower forms, or their lower levels, it can look like they are antisocial. They basically hide away, and they're very protective of their own energies. They don't want to be wasting a lot of that because they feel like they need to keep it for themselves. They don't want to waste their energy. 5 or 6s are about security. So in their lower levels, it can look like big time paranoia in the world. But at the higher levels, it can be really about becoming this amazing authority and really stepping into the role of leadership. 7s looking for freedom in the world can look like they're always running from their problems. They never want to look within at those lower levels. But at the higher levels, it can be an expression of pure joy, and you'll see people who you just really want to be around because they now embody that whole experience that we're all looking for of living joy. 8s are all about power, and that can look really ugly when it's in its lower levels because it can look like control and power over everybody else. But in its higher levels, it can be about the right use of power. There's leadership, and there's a way to make a difference in the world, and I think 8s can really get to that when they look to those higher levels. And then 9s, to wrap it up, they have they're striving for peace, a stillness within, and they don't necessarily want to they don't necessarily have their own perspective on anything. They kind of absorb and reflect back all of the other types. They don't have a necessity to have preferences that they express. And that can look like sloth and laziness and just willing to capitulate to everybody else in its lower levels. But at the higher levels, it can be one that can look at all sides and definitely mediate, different aspects of any particular issue and really embrace the whole love in its truest sense.
So, I mean, as you're talking through this, Kelly, I'm guessing that our listener, the person that's listening, is saying to themselves, wow. And you said this a little bit, that everybody can find themselves in each one of these types because we have all of these a part of us. But I assume that the person's going, okay, but which one am I, and how do I know? I want to know where I fit on this, this model. Do you have any ideas on how someone could start to begin to identify where they are on this model you just pretty much outlined for us?
Yeah, well, I think it would be probably helpful to look at better descriptions, ones that are a little bit more thorough. We all tend to get fixated on certain things, like the ones get fixated on the perfection. And I think if you're ones are probably more about resentment. That's their fixation, as an example. And I think if you read thorough descriptions of all of these, it may be that you start to recognize yourself. Now, like I said, there are 9 levels of each type, but then as you look at the whole Enneagram, there's a number on either side of every given type. And so there starts to be a relationship with one or the other of those sides, sometimes both. And so those are called wings. And there's also a disintegration and integration path, which I mentioned earlier. And sometimes you have to actually look at where it goes and where your tendency is in stress and when you're kind of more in your flow state, where your attention goes, and kind of map it around the Enneagram based on those integration and disintegration patterns based on those descriptions. So it's a process. You don't just most people don't just go, oh, that's me, and recognize themselves immediately.
Okay. Certainly. Well, I know that, I'm not unfamiliar with the system to the point where I have identified a type. I think, Antonia, you have, and Kelly, I'm assuming you also have as well. You kind of have a sense of where you fall on this system.
Right.
So I guess it's a very complex system, and it sounds like there's some more nuance to it that our listener might want to come and check out on our site. We've got a couple of resources around this and things that I know you and Antonia Kelly have worked together on creating. So I'll encourage people to do that, but also I guess the thing I'm asking is what can I do with this right now? Like if I'm listening and I want to know how do I see this? And you guys might have some ideas. Antonia, you looking at me like you might have some ideas on where someone can start. Like
Well, I think first I'm still in sort of the why question
Sure.
part as opposed to the how to. So the first question I have is, Kelly, what would you say is the major advantage to knowing your Enneagram type? Because it feels like it feels like there's probably some really, there's some really good stuff here and kind of understanding, all right, well, let's say that I'm a 1. I have a tendency to be perfectionistic. Now I kind of understand what that can look like. And that there's many, you said it's also, you said it's also sort of a vertical model, that there's different stages of development and growth. But what would you say is like really the major advantage to maybe seeking out more information on the Enneagram, or just like kind of wanting to figure out where you fall in this particular typology? What do you think is maybe even in your life been the most powerful expression of having a good understanding of the Enneagram?
Well, I think that most of us don't operate at the highest levels. I think that's, once we've started doing some self growth and self development, we can start to become aware of our own behaviors. Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun, I think she's a nun, might be a monk, I'm not sure. But anyway, she talks a lot about this term that the Buddhists use called Shenpa. And it's when you catch yourself in the act of getting hooked. And I think all of us do that. And I think our Enneagram type defines, or at least starts to give a structure to where we get hooked and why and how, and then how to get out of that, and how to really look at what it is that's triggering us, why it's triggering us, and then maybe bringing an awareness to it the next time it starts to happen. And so for me personally, I'm an 8, and that's the fixation is around control and power, and in a lower level, vengeance. 8s are they don't want to appear vulnerable, and they, in their higher forms, are very much protective of their clan and will look out for the underdog. But in their lower levels, and I don't mean the very bottom levels because that gets pathologic, but in the middle levels, or in the upper middle levels, there's a tendency to demand that they get what they want in the world. And I have been very much like that, and I still go there. When, for example, something's not right in a store or whatever, I can get very demanding, and it is not fun. And even when I was doing it before, I would always feel bad afterwards. But now I can really step back and observe myself while I'm doing it, and I think I can control it and make a better outcome out of it. But even when I can't, I can at least get some perspective on it and go, oh, you know what? That's probably not a good way to look at this. It's not going to do me any good. People are never going to be as glad to help me out when I'm in that mode. So it's helped me to put some perspective on that, and to realize that if I really want what I want, there might be a better approach. And I think if you go around all the Enneagram types, there's something that triggers them, a behavior that it creates, and then another level to step back and observe that behavior and maybe do it differently. So it's all about choice points.
Yeah, I remember somebody quoting Einstein. I have no idea if this is an actual Einstein quote. I've gotten really cynical about whether or not quotes that are given to certain people as that they've said are accurate. But that said, this person told me that Einstein one time said that if he had 60 minutes to save the world, he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem. And I think one of the most powerful components of Enneagram, since I've been studying Enneagram for the last couple of years, and one of the most powerful components of the Enneagram is that it gives me a higher level of awareness of what's going on with the challenges that I face and the problems that I face. Like, it's giving me that 55 minutes to define the problem. And just like, I mean, you're an Enneagram 8, I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm the achievement-oriented I need to make sure that I'm always giving value. And one of the disintegration components of an Enneagram 3 is indecisiveness and being fake. Like, basically your attempt to give value to other people means that you're allowing them to set the terms of what value is. So you're sort of always jumping to their tune. You become sort of a puppet to everybody else. And there's a fakeness that comes with it. A fakeness of not being your true authentic self, and in an effort to constantly getting that validation that comes from, achievement, and the validation that comes from fulfilling what other people would define as value. And so there's losing sort of a sense of self. And I think once I became truly aware of what my Enneagram type was, and that I have a tendency to disintegrate to that, or to like go to that place of, you tell me what value is. Like, you tell me, and I'll be the puppy that runs up and, Kelly and I were talking about it before, but I want to be the puppy that grabs the slippers, right? Yeah. Like, even if you didn't ask for it. And so it's like, oh, good puppy. And I was always looking for the pat on the head. And once I discovered that, it became a lot easier for me to observe my behaviors while I was doing that and asking, is this authentically me? Is this a thing that I want to be doing and engaged in? Or is this something that I'm doing because I have this like sort of this, I want to call it pathological, but it's not truly pathological. It's just sort of intrinsic strategy. But I have this strategy of needing to have my value continually validated to me. And when I realized that was the case, it was much easier for me to reevaluate my decisions and go, yeah, I don't think that one's me. Like, I think I'm doing that for somebody else. I don't think that I'm doing that one for me. And it gave me a lot more sense of self, sort of a groundedness where I don't feel like I have to dance to other people's tune. Yeah. And that gave me a lot more self-direction to help me figure out what it was that I really wanted in life, as opposed to what everybody else wanted me to have in life. So I've personally seen the Enneagram, knowing my Enneagram type and understanding how that strategy generally works, has given me a really powerful tool in being able to be more self-directed in order to, kind of get over that strategy and become a better version of myself.
Yeah. I actually have a very similar experience knowing I'm an Enneagram 6. I identify myself as a 6, which is, as Kelly, you mentioned, is concerned about security and kind of knowing that you always have like a network of people to fall back on is how I've kind of interpreted that. And I see myself making decisions sometimes not based in my own best interest, but based in making sure that I've got people on the wings and on the cusp of, if everything goes wrong, I've got people to rely upon, and I'll make decisions to not burn bridges, and not that I want to burn bridges, but make decisions to like keep people close and appease people and make sure that my network is strong of people that are able to be relied upon, whether they're family or friends, because then I know I've always got security. I always got that safety net, basically, is kind of what my... And I see this and I identify it. I'm like, wow, I see this choice I'm making. This is not authentic to me either. I'm making it because I know that I feel like this inherent sense of wanting security in people and having that network around me, whether it's people or even physical things or whatever. But knowing that now, I can see, I see what I'm making that decision around. I know why I'm doing this now, and I can make better choices, more authentic choices based on that.
Well, we have a great example, Kelly, if you don't mind us indulging and sort of giving real life examples of this. Joel's parents are moving out of the house he grew up in. They've been living there for 25 years.
Since I was like 11 or something.
Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of stuff that was kept over the years that go back to you were like a little kid. You've got items and toys and papers and schoolwork from the time that you were like...
I have 3-year-old birthday cards.
Yeah.
Somebody gave me when I was 3. That's hey Joel, you're turning 3 this day. I'm like, whoa, I've got a 3-year-old birthday card. Cool.
Yeah, and based on like we have a very similar Myers-Briggs type. And I have nothing from my past. Like, we moved all the time, and I just, like, threw everything away. So I have nothing from my past. So it's really interesting observing how Joel is moving through this process of dealing with all of these items that, for both of us as our Myers-Briggs types, we don't really like to be burdened with stuff. Like, we like to be really mobile and be able to pick up and move. And we both of us have this, like, fantasy. I mean, it's a fantasy now because we have a family, but it's a fantasy of like paring everything down to one suitcase and just being able to like pick up and leave at any moment. And at the same time, I'm watching Joel sort of have this relationship with all these items, these physical, tangible items that represent, I think, a safe sense of safety for you. Yeah. A sense of security, and going, what do I do with this stuff? Do I throw it away? Do I take pictures of it and then throw it away? Do I keep it for my kids? Like, it's really interesting. And I think as an Enneagram 3, I don't think I would have had this issue. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't have this like relationship with safety. Kelly, would you say that it's accurate to say that maybe sort of some of the things that he's, some of the feelings he's feeling could be based on his Enneagram 6 security-seeking nature, sort of having a bond with physical objects that maybe I wouldn't have as a 3.
Yeah, I think that could be. I was trying to think as you were talking about any other types that would have that nostalgia, and I think all of us have a little bit of that, just because it refers back to a simpler time, at least in our minds. But 6 is probably more prone to those kinds of attachments, I guess. I'm not that's not necessarily a fact. It just sounds like it makes logical sense.
Yeah. Well, I think knowing the Enneagram type is, for me, knowing it is very helpful just to kind of, and I think that you said earlier, you used the word awareness. It's really helpful for me to see, oh, I see why I'm making this choice. This doesn't, like, I'm in conflict. Like, I don't want to necessarily make this choice, whatever the choice might be, but I'm making this choice, and what is going on for me? And then I'm like, oh, I'm an Enneagram 6. I get it. I have some security things. I kind of want to feel tied and secure in some way. And I'm making choices that may not be what I would even expect myself to make. But I get it, knowing my type, basically, knowing this Enneagram, right, placement.
Well, and that will help you make better decisions, like we're talking about with all this stuff. My instinct is to just throw everything away, right? Like, I was like, just toss it. Like, we don't need it. We don't want it, like, weighing us down. But that might not be the right choice for you. It might be the right choice for me, as a different type that doesn't really have the same attachment. But for you, it might be better to keep some of those things as nostalgia. Yeah. So and if you were going based on my influence, you might listen to me, and that might be a terrible decision, right? Like, to listen to me, because I'll be coming at it from a completely different place. So I think one of the advantages to understanding your Enneagram type is that it's nice to be able to kind of get your quirks and recognize, make better choices, more informed choices about how to move, where to go. You mentioned, Kelly, that there's like levels of, higher levels of health or ascension, or basically, better versions of yourself. And then if you know those, then you almost have like a path of growth. You kind of have an idea of what the next level looks like. So you know what the next, what are you climbing toward? And if you get a good idea of your Enneagram type and then sort of where you fall in the 9 levels, or, the different levels of health and better versions of yourself. Yeah. It's like you almost get a roadmap for what does it look like? What does the next level or the higher level of health look like for me? And just knowing what it looks like can sometimes help us get there.
Yeah, and that's not to say that once we reach the next level, we don't go backwards. I think that a lot of times we find ourselves handling things differently than we want, and if we can go back to that model of the levels, perhaps we realize that we've gone on autopilot and haven't necessarily been conscious or aware of the choices and the behaviors that we're exhibiting, and we've kind of gone and taken the path of least resistance, and so some of those levels will be visited a bunch of times, back and forth, hopefully not more than a couple levels at a time. But I think that is what the Enneagram does. It allows us to disengage autopilot and really take the driver's seat and make better choices in our lives.
So we have, Kelly and I just worked on a tool. It's called a profiler tool on the Enneagram. So that's a resource that's available. And I also have recorded a tool that gives an introduction to Enneagram. But all of that said, Kelly, what do you think is maybe one of the best resources, maybe one of the best books on the Enneagram if you were to recommend to somebody?
Well, as it happens, I've created a resource list that will be available on a website that people can go and just download the PDF. It's let's see, spiritualwealthlab.com, and it'll be there. You won't miss it, and so just go and get it. But to answer that question, I think there are three major schools, two of which are probably the best places to start out. One is anything that Helen Palmer or David Daniels has written. They are from what's called the narrative school of the Enneagram. It's a little bit more intuitive based, so a little bit more about meditation and really feeling into what each of these types feels like when you're expressing them. So she's got the Enneagram at Work and Play, and lots of I think David Daniels has the Essential Enneagram. It's a short little book. They give great overviews. I personally find that it helps to start with something shorter, because you can get bogged down in the details of each type and never make it through the whole book. But once you're ready to really look at all the types and not just skip around to the chapters that interest you, I think the Riso Hudson stuff is amazing. Don Richard Riso, R-I-S-O, and Russ Hudson. And they've got a number of books out there. All of them have integral tests, and they also have websites you can go and take a test. And that's all in the resource list that I've made.
Okay, awesome. So if anybody wants to get an overview of this and wants to get that link, visit personalityhacker.com and go to this particular podcast. There are notes under the podcast on the Personality Hacker website. We always make podcast notes, and you're going to find links there. You're going to find references that Kelly has just been talking about to the Enneagram if you're really interested.
Okay, cool. Hey, Kelly, thanks so much for being a part of the podcast today. We really appreciate you coming on and kind of sharing about the Enneagram and all of your hours and hours of study and wisdom, years of study and wisdom, and really, absorbing this. I mean, we just really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the invitation to do so with you. It's really, really been fun.
Yeah, I know this system is massively complex, and there's all sorts of things to go down. And I think the advice you gave of starting, small and getting kind of an overview, getting an overview is important, because it's so complex and there's so many levels and layers that kind of getting that primer is a good start.
Yeah, I would say, though, I would recommend people go for it, though. It's a really interesting system. If you're interested in personality psychology, it's maybe one of the more complex, but it's definitely extremely rewarding. So, yeah, go check out all the resources mentioned.
I know that we here at Personality Hacker, we have a lot of testing and resources around how your mind learns and makes decisions. And I know, Antonia, you've kind of dedicated yourself. This is kind of the next area you want to master is the Enneagram, and you've really gone down a lot. I mean, you and Kelly have worked a lot on this, so I'm excited to see some of the stuff coming out. There's going to be more resources at personalityhacker.com around the Enneagram. We're going to have lots of those posted there. Like Antonia said in the notes, you can find the link to Kelly's website, spiritualwealthlab.com, and let us know what you think. Give us some feedback on this podcast, on the Enneagram, on some things that we've been talking about. You can find us on facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack. And again, personalityhacker.com is our website. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And you've been listening to the Personality Hacker Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.